Well, it's time for another walking through Mark, number 14, and the passage location is Mark chapter 8, verse 31. I'll give you a moment to find that if you like to follow along. Mark chapter 8 and verse 31. And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He spoke this word openly. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But when he had turned around and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter, saying, "Get behind me, Satan, for you're not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men." Pause there just for a moment and comment, and then we'll resume our reading. This is now approaching the near the end of his so-called 3-year ministry. His 3 years of going about doing good and working miracles and teaching and all of that from his baptism to this point has been about 3 years. And so you might think, I don't know if it crossed your mind or not, that how can that be? We're only halfway through the book. I mean, we're not even into chapter 9, and there's 16 chapters in Mark. But as is true with the Gospels, especially Matthew, Mark, and Luke, maybe John too, although I haven't thought about that as much, a good portion, generally speaking, half of their Gospel records deal with hours, a couple days, a week maybe at the most, leading up to the cross. And so you have a sizable amount or portion of their writing devoted to what took place just in the last 48 hours, or at the most, as I said, the last few days before the cross. And so here we go. And you might say, well, why mention that? Well, here's why. He mentions here openly, Mark says he spoke this openly. This was not something real quiet, shy, silent, secretive, behind the scenes. It was openly spoken about how that he was going to be put to death. He was going to, even leading up to being put to death, be mistreated, and is that ever putting it mildly? Persecuted strongly, greatly, and the such like. Suffer, he uses. I'm looking now at the word that is chosen by Mark to convey the thought. He must suffer many things. And one more thing, and it would include a rejection by the religious establishment of the time. They're called here elders, chief priests, scribes, those folks who would be normally regarded and respected as being close to God, somewhat even a representative of God, definitely people who were like spokespersons, whether they were prophets or not, still they were regarded highly for their place in society. They would reject him. All of this is being spoken up front. I mean, when it happens later, and it's not much later now, as I said, we're getting now close to the time, it's just a few days or weeks before the cross. When it happens, easily it could be said, "Didn't I tell you?" Now, I don't know that Jesus ever worded it that way to them, although the angels do. It's just now coming to mind after his death, burial, and his resurrection. I think an angel said, "Did he not tell you?" So there is a reminding of some of these things. But anyway, that be as it may, the point I really want to hammer or hit hard on is this is foreknown and not just predicted, it's foretold as to what would be happening shortly. And Peter, hearing this, we would say innocently enough. When I say innocent, I don't, no harm done, no intention of doing any harm. If anything, he means well. There you go. That's an expression we would probably use. Well, he means well. Peter means well to say, "Oh, we're not going to let anything bad happen to you, Lord." I'm putting this in my own words. We're not going to let anything like that happen to you. We'll stand up for you, and so forth and so on. Well, I'm laughing and it's not funny, but look at what Jesus says in response to that. "Get behind me, Satan." You know, Peter is not literally being inhabited by the devil. Now, a little bit later on, Judas, of course, is going to be entered by the devil to do his dastardly deed in betrayal and all of that. But in this case, it's just the influences of the devil. I don't believe here that what's being said by Jesus is that, Peter, you've been somehow possessed by the devil. But definitely it's the influences of the devil. And not only that, not only is that just so startling to hear that the devil is influencing Peter's mind and his words too. Um, don't want to miss this next point. The devil is behind Peter's meaning well. I'm just wanting to do good. I'm just wanting to help. Who would want to be suffering? Who would want to be rejected and put to death and mistreated and so forth? No, 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 no. Won't let that happen. That can be the devil talking. That can be the devil talking. Because if it's against the Lord's will, meaning the Father's will, God's will, then any of our, well, I meant well, is going to fly. It's not going to hold any weight. It's not going to be with God seen as, well, okay, you get a pass because you meant well. It's not going to work. It wasn't going to work here with Peter, as Jesus makes it quite clear. You're just concerned about things how things would look and appear and be from a human standpoint. I'm looking at it from God the Father's standpoint, and this is part of His plan. This mistreatment, this abuse, this killing, and so forth that's about to happen. This is a part of the grand scheme or plan of God. And you're trying to prevent that happening or save me from that happening, spare me, assist me avoiding that happening. Yeah, that's what the devil would love to see happen. Okay, verse 34. When he had called the people to himself, with his disciples also, he said to them, whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him the Son of Man will be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. Let me read that last verse again. I sort of muddled it up. Verse 38, for whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him the Son of Man also will be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. Jesus here mentions we, his followers, having to bear crosses too. He has not mentioned here, at least not, I don't mean he's never said anything about the cross, but he's not just spoken of it here previous to this to set it up. But nonetheless, he mentions that you have a cross to bear too. I have a cross to bear. Literally, he has one to bear. And figuratively, when he talks in the Garden of Gethsemane to the Father, let this cup pass from me, you could say that was his cross to bear. And of course, everybody knows the story, literally, the cross of Jesus, bearing his cross for a while, then someone else being conscripted and compelled to bear the cross for him and so forth. But in this case, whether literal or figuratively speaking, we all will have crosses to bear in following Jesus. This will not be something, meaning coming after the Lord, I want to be on your side. I want to be, he calls it a disciple. You want to be a disciple? Be ready, be ready. I don't think it's going to be a rarity. I don't think it's going to be one of those things that maybe once in a while you will hear about, but it's not the normal case. But rather, he just says, and I'm reading again, whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. It's generally a rule or a statement. He then words it a little differently by saying in verse 35, if you're not wanting to go that route, if you're going to try to save and spare your life at the expense of having any kind of cross to bear or a denial of what you want and following after Jesus, you're going to lose it. You're going to lose your soul. Uh, the salvation of your soul will involve putting yourself on the back burner, putting yourself in the rear, putting what I want, and a lot of that involves not self denial, but doing what I want. Or for sure, I don't want to put myself through any kind of grief or cross bearing, so to speak. If that's going to be the case, you're going to lose your soul, and for you to save your soul for the gospel's sake, that will be a part of it. Then he adds, I think it's to get them to think, is it going to be worth it? That's how I'd say it. Is that going to be worth it to you? If you were to profit the whole world, let me put this in other words. If you don't deny yourself what you want, and you're not willing to go through any difficulties for the gospel's sake and for your soul's salvation, what's it going to profit you when the world's done? You go on. You aren't done. You aren't finished when your physical life is over. Now what profit has it been to you? How does he say it? What will it profit a man if he gains the whole world? I mean, just extend it out there as far as you hypothetically want to go with it. It's, if you lose your soul, has it been worth it? And the answer's in the question. And will there be anything that can be given? Well, it's worded as a question. What will a man give in exchange for a soul? Implied is you would give everything, but it's not going to be acceptable. That's not going to be the price. You can't say, Lord, here's the whole world. I want to save my soul now. That won't be an exchange. That's not the exchange price, if you will. And then the last verse that I read there was, if this is something you're ashamed of, I don't want to go down this path. It just embarrasses me to be following after a man that was executed on a cross. This is such a stumbling block to me to think that that's the way I have to be saved. I don't want any part of this. To the Gentile world, it might be regarded as nonsense or foolishness. Okay, you have free will, and you can choose which way to go, but this is the way that's being laid out for you to go. If you choose to do otherwise, and this is something that's beneath you, and I don't want to go there, and I'm ashamed of that kind of thing, okay, your choice has been made. I'll be ashamed of you when I come back. And what a sad, sad picture. All right, let's stop there for today. Thank you very much for listening.